constantly at an anxious parent's side is more likely to badly injure himself than a child on a risky playground, because that child doesn't have the ability to learn when he or her is in a tricky, dangerous situation, and he hasn't learned how to correct that. And in one of the Norwegian studies on risky play that I read, Leif Edward Ottesen Kenner says that risk is not necessarily a danger that needs to be avoided, but rather something that needs to be managed. In other words, risk and risky playgrounds aren't something that we should avoid altogether, but rather we should have environments that foster this risky play and child development. So, as I was saying, injury proneness has little to do with the playground. In fact, it has to do with the child's past experiences with risky situations and how that affects how they perceive danger, whether they perceive a situation as dangerous or not. I read a lot of studies on how this actually differs based on gender, too. At a young age, boys perceive a situation much less dangerous than girls would perceive that same situation. It also depends on what rewards they see for taking that risk. And lastly, their own propensity to take risks. So please take the next 10 seconds and think of your favorite part of the playground as a child. If you can't remember, then just write down your favorite part of the playground as an adult. Teenager. So raise your hand if that part involves heights or speed. Okay, well there's a reason for that. These risky elements actually give children a thrill. And children will do whatever they can to have that thrill, because this feeling of losing control while simultaneously learning to deal with and keep grasp of control is exactly what children want when they play. Because they learn how to overcome these fears and overcome the challenges that they experience while playing. This led me, all these things that I learned in all these studies led me to design my own dream playground, which I have here. And it is not supposed to be a factually correct drawing, but rather just a visual description of kind of what I had envisioned. And I won't have time to explain every single part, but I'll explain a few right now. The first is right here. It's a platform. In order to cross the river, it's a platform and there's a rope, and the child stands on the wooden platform and pulls himself across the river onto the other side using the rope. Here's a picture of it that I found online. And does this look like fun to all of you? Yeah. Okay. And so this brings in the element of the dangerous elements, water. And also the child has to learn how to balance himself in order not to fall into the water, although it wouldn't be the end of the world because this is a natural river. The second element on my playground is the zip line. This tackles both speed and height. So here's, if you don't know what a zip line is. The next element is, I have two slides here coming down from the treehouse. One lands in a ball pit and the other one lands in water. So this is about rough and tumble, especially in the ball pit, both heights and speed. This section of my playground here is a build-your-own playground. It's very similar to what you saw in Adventure Playground, kind of wood all over the place, nails, hammers, different tools for your child to build what he or she envisions as their own play environment. And lastly, I created this, so there are no images online actually, but they're circular monkey bars, vertical. So if you can imagine monkey bars and then rolling them up like this, and having some sort of base to have them kind of lifted up, and that way it involves both hanging. You still get that hanging element, but you can also climb on it on the other side of the, just as you can do on monkey bars. But there's no no one's defining for the child where to start and where to begin. The child can get on wherever he or she would like and decide to end, and there's no feeling of failure. So why does all of this matter? The first is that many of us will be parents one day. Some of us already babysit, and some of us in this room, not me, but are parents. And I think it's just important that to remember that while safety is important, it's also important to allow children and foster children give them an environment to test limits and overcome fears. And it's hugely significant developmentally for these children to have these experiences at a young age. Secondly, I think we ought to put more attention and care into the time that kids spend playing. Teachers in preschool spend so much time, as we heard in Mariah's presentation, planning out every second of the day so that the children are constantly involved in activities. And I think just as much time that goes into planning exercises in the classroom, that time should be spent planning what the playground is looking like outside. I think that the greatest flaw in playground design is that it's adults envisioning what adults would like to see out there, rather than thinking like kids and putting themselves in a kid's position in order to think about how kids envision their own playground. And Claire Griffiths, the playground manager at the Land, says, "I didn't have a vision of the playground, because that takes it away from the kids," which I think just hits the head on the nail. Because by us putting so much of our own kind of perceptions and adult perceptions of fun or safety, takes the playground in many ways away from the kid. And lastly, I think that we underestimate the minds of kids. As I pointed out, kids are geniuses at divergent thinking, and we no longer are. Many of us are not. And I think that we should try to think more like them sometimes. And the other day I was actually at my pottery studio, and a little girl was painting her frog pink. And after the fact, the instructor went up to her and said, "Your frog's pink." And she goes, "My frog can be whatever color I want my frog to be." And I think that the playground can be whatever we want to make of it. It doesn't just have to be the plastic slide and the monkey bars. So with that, please know I'm excited, and thank you very much. Yes, Nima?
Hi. So, first of all, this is really interesting, and I never thought about this before, so it's really cool that you did this. But also, so you say it's important to, like, incorporate it when we're children, so how about as we get older, like, through high school and middle school, I don't know if you did any research or, like, what you personally think about incorporating, like, kind of more creative play, not necessarily, like, going by strict curriculums.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
Well, I actually read a study on the correlation between self-directed executive functioning skills and less structured time. More or less structured time. I don't know if that makes sense. And I think that runs all the way for anyone in high school and beyond. I think that having time that's not structured and that we're not sitting in a classroom is really, really important. Experience, I think, is the best way to learn. So I think that's true for any age group, really. Yeah, we go.
How do you think that the incorporation of technology in everyday schooling from a young age of, like, preschool, I know, like, 3-year-olds who know how to use an iPad, how do you think that that's affecting this ideal that you're shooting for with these creative playgrounds?
It's a good question. I don't think it affects so much the creative playgrounds, because I don't think I hope that time that they're spending on the screen is not in replacing going outside and playing on the playground. But what I think it does affect is after school, for preschoolers and kindergartners, instead of going off and playing make-believe, they go straight to the tablet or whatever else. And I think that really is harmful.
Yeah.
Lisa?
Have you heard during research of any incidents happening of like kids getting hurt from these playgrounds?
So as I said, I've heard instances from kids getting hurt actually on normal playgrounds. You know the YouTube video that I showed you of Adventure Playground? Well, I assume it's a parent who created this video, and it ends by showing his kid on a normal play structure, and then it says, it has a text, and it says, 15 minutes later we went to the like more traditional playground setting, and he broke his collarbone. So I think, kids are going to get hurt on either one. The difference is a hazard or risk. And risk is something that a child will pursue. Risky situations are children pursue that risk, whereas a hazard is something that they don't see. So what we need to take away are hazardous elements, but what we need to include more of are risky elements. Yeah, Alana?
I know that, for instance, there's a lot of playgrounds, like the one in Berkeley Montessori, Nephew Boat area, that like it's really creative, but it's not necessarily risky. And I was wondering, what are the differences between like having a creative playground that doesn't have like spikes and heights and stuff, but has like non-traditional elements, versus like nails and water and all that?
I think that some elements of the Berkeley Montessori playground are very risky. There's kind of a lot of things that you can fall off of, and I don't even know how to explain it. It's like very modern-ish. But, I think that the issue is more so one of just reinventing our idea of a playground. So I really like those playgrounds like that. But I think that the issue is that we just need to rethink how we want to kind of, what we want outside the classroom to look like, and replace a lot of the playgrounds that you see in public schools and even in our own neighborhoods that are the basic slide, monkey bars, swings. Because I think there's so much more potential for playgrounds than that. Mr. Green?
This was absolutely fascinating, and speaking as someone with kids, it's actually a little bit life-changing for me. So it sounds as though everything that you did, every discovery that you shared with us is rooted in research. This isn't just opinion. So why is it not a growing trend, especially in San Francisco, which we think of as being so forward-thinking? There's these parks or playgrounds popping up all over the place, which is great, and they're lovely play structures with the slide and the monkey bars and all that, and they're shiny and they are pretty.
Yeah.
And everyone's so thrilled. Why is this not a trend here?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't think that parents know that there's so much work that's been done on this. The adventure playgrounds actually started around World War II because there was less focus on sheltering your children, because many parents knew that their children or they themselves were going to have to go off to war. So I think it's just more helicopter parenting, more sheltering, and I think that it's kind of the opposite of what you would think. You would think that risky playgrounds would lead your child getting hurt more often. So I think it's just a matter of parents needing to kind of take that extra step and read some studies. Yeah.
So if I could just add something to that, I think Hannah said something in her presentation that kind of hit the nail on the head, which is that adults get in the way. They start perceiving things as they want it to be, bright and shiny and safe, and stop seeing it as a kid. And I think the other part of it is that we live in an incredibly litigious society. So anything you do is open to a lawsuit if somebody gets hurt.
And also, my dad has been working on redoing a lot of playgrounds in Berkeley in particular. So he also has a lot of experience with parents complaining that the playground's too risky. Yes, Kayla.
So you mentioned that you yourself went to one of these playgrounds as a child. And after doing this research, what do you think the impact on you has been based on that experience?